There's War and Violence. I'm Yolanda Wallace, and I'll be your host. A special shout out and thank you to our producer, Tim Shelley, for making things happen behind the scenes. Today, our topic will be guns and violence. And today, I have Jason Shimmin. Welcome.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
Awesome. Good morning, Jason. As we spoke about the podcast, thank you again for accepting our invitation to our show. And we would just like you to know that I know that you do some things with guns. Can you just tell me a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I'm a 52-year-old male. I was born in Peoria and raised locally. Went to Concordia Lutheran Grade School and grew up going to Redeemer Lutheran Church. I joined the Army late in life at 34. Okay. I had owned my own business in the construction industry for 10 years before that. Started getting into firearms and the love and passion for shooting when I was 20. Obviously, that grew a little bit more in the Army. I had access to firepower that most civilians don't get to shoot.
Right.
So since then, I've become an advocate for firearm safety, and I'm an NRA instructor. I teach concealed carry. I teach a lot of beginner firearms classes. And lately, I've been trying to get into where I can work with some of the local schools or any organization, really, that has questions or wants to know more about firearms. And I basically want to promote that safety so that nowadays, it seems in our culture, there's a higher chance or probability that you will see gun violence or you may come across a firearm. And I just want people to know how to clear that firearm and make that firearm safe and have the knowledge on how to handle it safely.
Well, that's exactly why we invited you to our show, so we can have this open conversation about firearms. Now, I know that the Constitution, it's the Second Amendment. It says that regulated militia, thank you,
yes,
being
ma'am.
necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms, and shall not be infringed.
Yes, ma'am.
What's that mean to you?
So I believe to fully understand a rule or a process as it is written. Mm-hmm. So our founding fathers, obviously, they were fleeing from an oppressive government. Mm-hmm. And so they set this up. I believe they wrote it amazingly well. I think God helped them write it. But I think they were thinking, a lot of people think, oh, that's just to cover hunting weapons. And they're not talking about hunting weapons or hunting. It's for us as a population to defend ourselves against domestic or foreign enemies, just like we talk about when we take an oath to join the military or police officers, first responders.
Right.
But also against a tyrannical government. So in all of history across the world, anytime you've had, let's say, weapon registration, mm-hmm. that is always followed with weapon confiscation. That's happened 4 times in the world. Hitler was the most notable, but Stalin also did that, same in China. Oh, and so that's one of the reasons why a lot of pro-gun people like myself, I'm against a registration. Also, who's going to hold the registration?
What do you mean? You're against registering that you're a shooter, that you have a gun? Or what do you mean by that?
Well, as far as like certain states, especially our state, mm-hmm. our state is very restrictive and has much
gun laws and
right. But yet that our violence is not lower than states that have less gun laws. So, and I'm not saying that you don't need gun laws. Obviously, we do need gun laws. Mm-hmm. And we are a land of rules mm-hmm. and laws. And if our society would follow those rules and laws, we would have a successful and I believe a peaceful society. But we're not following those laws. And a lot of the Constitution we haven't followed for several decades. And yet we wonder why we're having all these issues. And gun violence is a big issue, mm-hmm. and it's been on the rise. And as our population rises, I think it'll unfortunately keep rising. And so you asked me about the Constitution. I believe the Second Amendment gives us the right to bear arms, and it doesn't put a limitation to the arms that we can have. Back then, they only had certain types of weapons, but those weapons were also what the military used. Nowadays, to have fully automatic weapons, like what the military uses, you as a civilian can still get those licenses, but they're extremely expensive. And you're going to have the ATF, the alcohol, tobacco, and you're going to have several federal agencies checking up on you continually. But for the most part, the average citizen, like you and I, especially in Illinois, you would have to have a FOID card, which is we're the only state that has a FOID card. No other states have that. One other state has a permit card, but that's different. So you have to have a FOID card, and that gives us the privilege, or it gives us our right to bear arms and to be able to buy and purchase ammunition and have ammunition. But it doesn't give me the right to have a fully automatic weapon, like a belt-fed machine gun or a fully automatic pistol or fully automatic rifle. So all of the weapons, say, that I own in my collection, they're all semi-automatic. For every time I pull the trigger once, one bullet is fired, and that's it. Now, I train so I can shoot pretty fast. I used to competitively shoot, which more training. But it's also rigorous safety involved anytime you're handling firearms.
Well, so I can tell you that I'm totally afraid of the whole situation about guns. First of all, when I look back at the Second Amendment, at the time that it came out in the 1700s, right? With John Hancock and everybody writing it, majority of African Americans, well, they weren't African Americans, they were Africans, were enslaved. So it was a way that they used, and there's different levels of slavery that they had at that time, and ours was more of a chattel slavery. One of the worst that I've heard ever, and it seems like it's kind of hard right now to still be free from that type of slavery in a strange sense, like 2022, speaking of laws, there's just a law called the Crown Law, and that was just so that people of color could wear their hair out. There was, before, I guess, I don't know, maybe, I have no idea. In the United States. So 2022, there's certain laws that apply to you being a white person and me being a black person, that these laws don't always cover
both of us the same.
The same.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and that's kind of scary. So when I start thinking about, I have to have a law to wear my hair,
that seems ridiculous.
There's got to be a law. Just the Emmett Till law just recently happened, in 2022. This is in our time. This isn't something in the past.
Right.
And it's kind of scary, and they were called lynching. And so back in the old slavery days, our great-great-grandparents passed down to their kids and stuff, which were our grandparents, shared these stories about how, the slave masters used to use their guns to
manipulate and control.
Yes.
Fear-based.
Exactly. And so, I think, in my mind, it's kind of almost a little fear factor. However, I realize that our society is changing to the point almost that you have to have, people are thinking that they have to have something to protect themselves, know. For me, I have lived many years of just put my trust and faith in the Lord. But it doesn't mean that a person doesn't have faith in the Lord because they have a gun. It's just that I'm afraid to have one because I don't know the whole thing. And of course, thinking about, I had a son that was killed in 2006. And this gun, and I want you to tell me about this gun because you're an expert. It was a 45, is what they said.
45 caliber?
So, yes, and that, or 42. So that's a small gun, right?
If it was a 22,
okay,
shoots a very small bullet.
Okay.
But you have to remember that small bullets still moving out of a pistol at around 1,000 to 1,100 feet per second. And that little tiny bullet, if it's a .22, normally it enters into a human. When it hits a bone or anything hard, a lot of times it ricochets. So it may make a tiny little hole on the outside, but internally it can do a lot of damage, and you could be bleeding from multiple organs. Or, yeah, it's
Yeah, actually, I have called the coroner because it's been a long time that I've actually looked at what and remembered what, the style and the type of gun it was. But from what I've heard, it was a small gun. So, and it was only one bullet that was shot, and it went straight to his heart, and it came out the side, like
So it
along
turned.
the back side. So it turned what?
it probably hit his heart, which is a very dense, strong muscle, and then it deflected. So that's why it went in at one angle or one direction and then exited another direction. But
yeah, that's why I'm thinking they said it was a small gun, is what I can remember. So,
yeah,
so
humans
don't
were
quote
not
me on 45, but it was a small gun. So.
and small gun may mean a handgun, but a 45 is a much bigger bullet, much heavier.
It was a smaller gun, is what they said. So that's the correction. It was a smaller gun, and I don't remember exactly the size.
That's okay. We as humans were not designed to have bullets enter into us.
Right.
It's a bad thing.
Yeah. So now, how can we coincide in this world where you have been trained to use guns, where most Caucasian people train their kids to use guns? I've done home care, so when you go in the house, there's a gun at the front door. There's a gun case there. You know what I mean? This is a normal thing, but it's not normal for me.
Yeah, I didn't grow up in a house with guns. My dad loves the Lord, and luckily for me, I grew up under his authority and had a great dad.
Right.
And I'm still friends. We're very close.
That's good.
My dad lives in the
That's
Heights,
great.
so but he was not a gun guy. So a lot of people are shocked when they hear that.
Right.
But what do most kids, and I may be dating myself, but when we were younger and we ran around and played outside, my friends and I would play cowboys and Indians or bank robbers.
Right.
Always stuff where we're acting like we're, shooting
or
at each other
whatever.
and stuff. So there's this interest in, because a gun is dangerous.
Right.
Just like racing cars, it's that speed, that adrenaline. But so getting back to the gun violence, though, say you're using a rifle for hunting. That's a good thing. You use the rifle, you shoot an animal, you clean and process the animal, and then you can use that hide, let's say, like the Indians did. You can use every part of the animal, and it feeds your family. But the same person with the same gun, if he goes out and shoots 20 animals in a day, he can't process all those. So you think hunting's good. Well, it's like, who's using the tool? And if you use the tool incorrectly or for the wrong reasons, and so a lot of times gun violence, they focus on the guns. And I really think we have to focus on the mindset of the people that are using the guns. But also with gun violence, there's a big question, like, where are all the guns coming from?
Yeah, that's my question, that you and I have had.
Right.
And, there was a couple years ago, there was an article that was in the Chicago Tribune that there was some people from the South that, in the military, I think is in the Navy, who actually brought a whole big old thing of guns to Chicago and left it there. And
wow.
Yeah, so I don't know. Some people,
Yeah, so obviously they're illegal guns. They come from other countries. They come from our country. A lot of the guns that I have a lot of friends who are police officers in this area and in other states, friends from the Army that became police officers. So oftentimes guns that are used in crimes were perhaps guns bought by an individual like you or I legally, and they were stolen from their house, stolen from their car. This is another good reason to, if you own a firearm, be responsible and make sure that firearm is kept where someone without authority can't get to it. And that's why I think the safest place for a firearm when you're carrying a firearm is on your body. A lot of times women, that's hard for them, so they want to carry in a purse. But if somebody knocks you down and steals your purse, now they just got your wallet and all your identification,
Right.
and they get a free firearm. So this is a topic we could talk about for days,
Yeah.
and our nation's, obviously in our city even, is struggling with gun violence. So oftentimes people wonder what the solutions are. For us in Illinois to legally purchase a gun, you have to have a FOID card, which comes from the state police.
Mm-hmm.
All that says is that you're not a convicted felon and that you
Mm-hmm.
have the ability to buy ammo and guns, and they believe that you are a safe person as far as mentally.
Yeah, because now that's
Adequate.
a new issue
That's
that
another
they're
one.
starting to ask questions about. Is this person capable? Now, do they have to have a note from a doctor to say that they're
So they wouldn't have to have a note to say that they are, but let's say you
They're
go and
mentally
seek
stable?
treatment. Well, if you go and
Okay.
seek mental treatment
Mhm.
for, let's say, anxiety,
depression or whatever,
certain
PTSD?
certain types of PTSD,
Mm-hmm.
then all those are reported to, let's say, Human Services or another organization. Well, those organizations
Mm-hmm.
have to report their findings with that individual's
Right.
name to the state police, and then the state police would basically void your FOID card and have to send you a reason why they're voiding it,
Voiding
and
it.
tell you, we know that you've been under, whatever psychiatric care, that you struggle
Mm-hmm.
with these things. They don't think it's safe for you to have a firearm. A person who thinks about suicide a lot, probably not safe for them to have and own a firearm. But
Right.
these are just my opinions.
Mm-hmm.
So please let me make that clear.
Okay.
I don't want to misquote or say anything on laws in Illinois, but so yeah, what's the state of mind? I mean, even for our youth that run out and use firearms, it's like, why would they use a firearm? For one, well, a lot of their video games that they play now
Yeah.
glorify violence
In the
instead
shows
of
that they watch and
Right,
movies. and-
right. I mean, I was a soldier. I served in the Army. I deployed to
Mhm.
Iraq for just under 15 months.
Mhm.
I think war and violence is terrible.
Mhm.
I don't think we were designed for that. I don't think God created us to treat each other. It
Well,
says to treat each other with love and
yeah.
kindness.
Yeah, but there's some times where God allowed war.
True.
And so I think there's a time and a season for everything under the sun, but just trying to understand where are these kids getting these guns from? It's just hard for me to put my mind around because
Several
the
sources.
majority, I'm just saying, but the majority of the shootings and the killings that happen within the United States, majority of them are below the poverty level.
Mm-hmm.
So where are these guns coming from? Of course you gave one example that people are robbing and stealing,
Mm-hmm.
but there's other things that I have heard through some of the youth and, around the way, and they're saying stuff like sometimes, there's the black market. There's some people who are on drugs,
Mm-hmm.
some country boys who are on drugs, who are white, and they
Need money.
need money and they need drugs and they're trading.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would believe that. Yeah, there's if we wrote them all down, there's probably 20 sources.
Really?
The black market would be one. Illegal. I mean, I think as of to date, they think guesstimations are around 7 million people have crossed the border in the last year and a half.
Yeah.
How many of them are carrying firearms? Now, the ones that come and turn themselves in.
I don't know. I've not heard those stories yet.
So, I mean,
From the border, I'm just saying, because,
Right.
The United States pretty much searches everybody. So,
yeah. Well, they try to if you
Yeah.
go through a border checkpoint.
right, if you go
Yeah.
through a border checkpoint.
Yep.
But you're right. There are some other ways that they have gotten within the United States. And
Well, and
even the drug cartels, we know
Right.
that there have been some transactions. and
Well, and
stuff.
think about shipping containers.
Oh,
You look at
my.
the West Coast and the East Coast, one ship holds 6,000 of those shipping containers, and 10 or 20 ships come in per day. So there's 100,000 containers that hit each coast a day. They only search 1 out of 40, 1 out of 50, because they don't have the manpower or the capability to search every single one. Now, they may x-ray a lot more than that because they have special x-rays. But, I mean, guns could be coming in, like literally, like I said, if we wrote it down, 20 different ways. And then you already have how many millions and millions of guns in the United States that were legally purchased. But also, like you said, you have people that say somebody passes away and they leave all their firearms to their kids, and their kids aren't gun people.
Right.
They're going to turn around and sell them. Now, are they going to sell them the legal way?
Right. That's true.
Which normally you would, you know, in the old days, I would have done a hand receipt. I would have written out a bill of sale if I sold you a firearm, and I would have wrote down the date that we did it, the description of the firearm, serial number, all that stuff. Well, now in Illinois, you have to do all that, and you have to do it through the state police website. But the state police website oftentimes is not easy to navigate. It's not user-friendly. And again, there's only 3 or 4 states that actually have you do that. In a lot of other states where my friends live from the Army, you can just sell somebody a gun and shake a hand. There's no paperwork required. There's
really?
No. So those laws change from state to state.
Yes, from different states.
Now, if you purchase a new firearm from a store, you're going to fill out what's called a 4473, which is a federal form, and then that gun store has to keep that record forever. But still, that gun isn't registered, let's say, specifically to you or I. So if a firearm's used in a crime and they find it, the police, they're going to run the serial number, talk to the FBI, and they're going to find out who made the firearm, and then they find out who they sell it to, and then who they sell it to. And what distributor in California sold it to a gun store in Illinois, that gun store in Illinois sold the gun to Jason. Well, how did Tim end up with the gun and rob McDonald's and shoot somebody?
Right.
They're going to come talk to me and say, you bought this gun from this gun store.
See, and that's where I believe there should be some accountability to whoever purchased the gun in the first place.
Right.
Now, and if that gun was stolen, it's their responsibility to report that it was stolen.
You have less than 10 days in Illinois.
And if you don't report it, then you should be held accountable for your property.
Yes, ma'am.
Right? I mean,
yeah, that makes sense. That's common sense.
Yeah, it's just like having a house, and Yolanda built a house, and if I let it go to shams and to pieces, I'm going to get fined. I'm going to get some type of penalty or something. And I feel it's the same thing with these legal guns. Now, these other guns that they have that are showing are called ghost guns.
Yes.
Where are these guns coming from?
So,
who even makes them?
So I can only talk about ghost ARs. So an AR-15 is a rifle. It looks a lot like the M4.
Right.
Physically, it looks identical to what we carried in the Army. The only separation is our military version has a trigger where I can flip a switch, and instead of shooting 1 bullet every time I pull the trigger, it'll shoot 3. Sometimes you can flip it, and it'll just go full auto. So I could shoot all 30 rounds in a magazine in 2 or 3 seconds.
Oh my gosh! Look.
But these are weapons. That's actually the definition of an assault weapon. So a lot of times the media calls an AR-15 or other rifles assault weapons. That doesn't meet the definition. An assault weapon means every time you pull the trigger, you can fire multiple rounds. Well, that's considered.
That's what an assault weapon is.
The definition.
Okay.
And to own that, you have to have a Class 3 license, which is very expensive.
So then, like I said, these kids getting a hold to that, and they're getting
So they're
younger.
probably modifying the weapon themselves to make it full auto.
But how can they learn? How can
YouTube.
they know how? Oh my! It's all this is on YouTube.
You wouldn't believe all the stuff that's
my
on the
goodness.
internet.
Oh Lord, what
But
is our world coming to?
But the ghost gun, so when they say a ghost gun, they mean a receiver. So somebody took a blank receiver and they built a gun out of it, whether it's an AR-15 or a Glock, and it doesn't have serial numbers.
Yeah, Glock was another one.
And it didn't have, the frame was solid in certain areas. So you have to have a special jig, and then you have to punch holes. Like the AR, that's a big block of aluminum.
Right.
Well, it takes special equipment. You have to mill that out where the trigger is going to drop in and mill where the pins go. But,
oh my gosh.
But once you learn how to do that, or you buy a jig and you know how to do that, then you can basically make your own receiver from what's called a blank. Well, the blank is just a block of aluminum. So you can go
But we don't want to tell them how to make it now. Look.
They can watch videos on Same thing. It's on the
Well,
internet.
it's terrible.
I mean,
so what kind of mind or what kind of person would you have to be that you would want to make it to use it to kill someone?
that's a good question.
I know that in order for us to have meat and stuff like that, they have to kill animals, and I know that when we're going into war and to protect our country or whatever, you have to do what you have to do to make sure you protect, and you have to go to war, and if things need,
I know.
have to happen. So, but I just don't understand, how is it that the youth, now you tell me that sometimes in your, in your working time that, in your job sometimes as a security guard, you run across the youth. We were talking about some of the things that happened at the Illinois Fair.
Heart of Illinois Fair.
Heart of Illinois Fair this year. And I'm just really surprised that you just go ahead and share that story if you don't mind.
Sure.
And just how you.
So I do work security work often. I just enjoy that. I enjoy being in that protector role or trying to help keep peace. So you think the Heart of Illinois Fair, that should be a
peaceful place.
Right, fun family event. We had a group of kids, I would say there were 30 to 40, and they're hanging out in a great big group. Well, then you hear screaming and yelling, and they take off running, and they went from one location to probably 100 to 120 yards away in like 25 seconds. So here, it's basically a giant mob.
Right.
It kind of looks like 4-year-olds playing soccer. They don't really spread out. They stay in a giant lump, but when you get a giant lump and they're screaming and yelling, so several of our security team turned and saw them. There were also police, Peoria Police had great presence there. A lot of really good cops were there that day. So they go running over there. 4 or 5 females are fighting.
Females.
Teenage females. These are girls between, I would guess, 12 and, let's say, 15, 16.
Wow.
So several of them are pulling each other's hair, knocking each other to the ground. They're throwing fists, but not really hitting anything like that. They not like 2 boxers or 2 people going at it hardcore, but still they're trying to hurt each other and inflict physical harm. Half the crowd screaming and yelling, a lot of chaos.
And why do you think that is? Why do you think our kids some of our kids are going to violence? Because see, and I'm looking at race right now, and I'm looking at African Americans and whites, and I'm looking at some Latinos too, and they're not, Hispanics. There's not very many Hispanics that are in trouble here in Peoria. We have a few, but not like it is in bigger cities.
Right.
And they stay very close-knit together.
Very family-oriented.
They are very family-oriented, and I notice that, there's some family-oriented stuff in the blacks, but there seems to be more. I call it the evil eye. There's a grudge held much stronger.
Yes.
With those people, with my people.
Right.
And then I look at the white family, and I see that they have some unity, and there's sometimes some war going amongst each other, but not the way that I see it with the black kids, my kids. And then I also look at the Asian, and I don't ever hear anything about them. The worst I've ever heard about them here in Peoria is, somebody might get smart every once in a while, but violence is not something they seem to care very much about. They're, and the Indians, people from India, I noticed they're very culturally diverse and stay very close together, and
don't seem to show much appreciation for violence.
Right. They don't do it either.
Yeah, they're kind of isolated and quiet.
Yeah.
It's a different, there are several different cultures, and not always is culture divided up by race, but a lot of times it is. But I think a lot of it is the mindset. And I don't want to get too far off topic, but In the 20s and 30s, and I believe also in the 40s, right after World War II, China as a nation does not care for the United States. We know that we are not. We buy a lot from them. Yes, they're still a superpower. We're a superpower, but for the most part, China does not want to see the United States succeed. The Chinese government did a study on us, on the United States, and wanted to know, why is the United States so powerful, so influential, and so successful on a world level? And this is 70 or 80 years ago. They came up with the family unit, yes, and their the two things most powerful, their Judeo-Christian background. Now, do we still have those two positives driving our nation today? No. And you talked about how the family unit has come apart for African Americans. Mm-hmm. I think it's really come apart for whites as well. There's so much divorce and so much family separation. So, like talking about the Heart of Illinois Fair. So the kids got in a big fight. Several people ran over there. I was not one of them. I stayed at the main gate.
Right.
They come back 10 minutes later. They have 4 or 5 young girls in handcuffs. They bring them out front, call their parents, because all these are minors.
Right.
So it's like, what are you going to do for a consequence or for punishment for them trying to kick each other, hit each other, pull each other's hair, calling each other names? Now I get to stand there and watch the police officers. They trying to talk to the kids. They're like, all right, where do you live? They're just asking basic information so they can call the parents. Mm-hmm. Teenagers calling the cop, every name in the book, extremely disrespectful, gives them a fake name at first. And it's like, so what is the drive? Why would you do that? In my mind, I'm thinking, okay, so they're needing something emotionally, maybe attention or affection.
And, there's also the laws that have changed the role that the parent has, and it has taken a lot of rights away. So the kids are mostly running the households now. And
I talked you'd be surprised, just working security. I had a lot of people come up and stop at the gate and ask, hey, how long's the fair going on? What dates, how late's it going? How are you guys doing? And I had white families, African-American families.
Right.
I had 3 or 4 different families of all different race stop and ask, how's the fair going? And when's it open? And I would talk to them. And several times they talk and they would say, what's going on with our youth? What's going on? And I'm like, right. I mean, I think it's good that we talk about it.
It is.
And to be able to have a debate, whether you disagree with someone or not, that doesn't have to go to violence. So I'm not sure why they were doing that at the fair. So, and then we tried to keep the kids that were the main instigators in that fight. We tried to keep them off the property for the rest of the fair, and we told them that we're like, you cannot come back on the property
because you can't allow them to destroy everyone else's good time because they have chose. Because that's what it is, a choice,
right? To
just act out and be crazy,
And a lot of people that came to the fair, several of them were women with kids without a male with them.
What
if a mom's walking around with 3 little kids and 25 teenagers go running by and knock her over or children over?
Sometimes I think that's the whole cause and the reason that the families are failing, especially in our black people, our people of color, is because the majority of them, not saying everybody,
right.
When these different programs start putting out condoms and throwing them at them and tell them, hey, you got rights to your body, you do what you want to do, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
They didn't tell them, they was encouraging, that's kind of like encouraging sex without saying it. And then they took out programs about abstinence to reserve yourself. Because see, what they didn't tell you when they was throwing out all those rubbers and tell you to be safe. And I hear people saying, girl, they're going to go head on and do it anyway. No, that's not the whole message we should be sharing as mature women and people who have had families and kids ourselves.
I agree.
We should be talking about, let me tell you, if I get a chance, I would be saying, let me tell you, if you take that rubber, what that is doing, that is encouraging you to go do something with your body that is natural, but God has an order for the way you're supposed to do that.
There you go.
And you should be married before
Yes.
you even try and do that, because that good feeling could end up in a child.
Right. And that good feeling lasts good for what? A couple minutes?
A few minutes, right.
Just
that's
Yeah.
because and I always talk to my, because I got grand boys and grand girls, and I tell the boys, God made you to have a seed, and the girls, God gave you eggs, and I have to instill that in them so that they understand what that is. Even at a young age, they probably don't catch on to it now, but as they get older, they will learn that this little thing. But see, sometimes when you have these kids, because even when I see the mothers of murdered children around the city and some things I've done in our community, I still see more mothers that are crying and more open to talk than I do see their fathers.
Right.
So, and I know that these women didn't have these kids by themselves.
Well,
We're at a point now where I'm starting to see, even in obituaries, that these fathers are not even mentioned.
Wow, that's sad.
So,
yeah, you need a mom and you need a dad. I mean,
so,
that's how the biblical family was designed.
I know it, but in the black community, I just see us breaking down more and more and more, becoming more and more oppressed with all these different new things that they're putting out there in the schools. That they're
a positive male role model in every life helps.
Yeah,
and if you don't have a father, then you're missing that. Unless you find a mentor through an organization like yours, or through a church, or through some type of community-based program. But right now, I mean, we have so many businesses and restaurants, and they can't even find work, let alone volunteers that want to help. And it's like we have to set the example.
And you know what else? There's TikTok, there's Twitter, there's Facebook, there's all these social media platforms, and even YouTube, that are showing this misbehaving mischief.
So the mob. So we had 40 teenagers basically performing mob action, and I think some of them actually did get tickets.
I don't think they even realize, these kids don't realize that type of stuff is called mob action.
Well, I mean,
because
they're
hanging out with their friends.
Right. But once they turn that into a fight in that, but I will say, out of the 40 kids, you have 4 or 5 girls that were fighting. You have, say, 10 others that are screaming and yelling and instigating, trying to push them to keep fighting. The whole rest of the group, they're all filming it with their phones, shooting it live on TikTok or live, Snap, all that. I mean, I'm 100 feet away at the front gate, and I'm watching as they separate the ones that are fighting. They're trying to get the girls separated and trying to make order. They're trying to push everybody else back, to stop the instigation. Everybody's screaming and yelling.
That's just a sad thing for me to see, because I would
25 of the kids, they're
all
all holding their phones up.
Yeah, I immediately try to break it up, but I think if I did, they might try and jump me. I don't know.
Right. So and then you get back to the. We get back to the gun.
You need law enforcement.
Yes, yeah. But yet law enforcement, oftentimes, their hands tied. I mean, because like with the teenagers, so I mean, I'm 5'9", I weigh 190 pounds. Yes, I've taken martial arts. I've taken self-defense. I can handle myself. But nowadays, I mean, I have friends that their teenage boys are 13 and 14 years old. They're taller and outweigh me.
Yeah.
So you get 2 or 3 of them that want to get lippy with you, and you try to stay in a non-physical confrontation. If one of them grabs you, it takes half a second. Now it's 3-on-1. Well, I'm either going to have to use some type of weapon, force, either a baton or something. And if one of them has a weapon, right. And so, yeah, it's very difficult, especially for police.
And if they have a weapon.
And nowadays, you were talking about, so if most of the police officers that I know, I mean, every interaction with someone else, they have to think in their mind, this person has a weapon.
And they might try to kill me.
Yes. So I mean, think
That's
of your
a fear.
Oh, and it's actually a form that causes PTSD. That mental state will cause PTSD in most of your first responders. And unlike me, so for me to experience PTSD the way I did in Iraq, I'd have to go into a war zone again. But a police officer or a firefighter or an EMT, a first responder, they experience PTSD on a daily basis. And it's in their hometown. It's where they live. Every accident or car accident that a police officer or firefighter in Peoria goes to, they might be seeing friends from church or their neighbors or their school kids' friends.
And now it's more common within the public schools that kids see people being shot. Some
Or
kids
physically.
are sitting right next to them, or physically beaten up or abused or whatever, and the unresolved PTSD that they have, and I say unresolved because they don't even know that they have it.
Right.
They haven't even went to go and get any medical
Or talk to
attention
anybody.
or talk to anyone about it. But they've got OSF Strive, and they have the new Carl Hospital who's taken over Unity Point. They have some mental health things, but it's just it's an interesting topic. And like you said, we could be here all day talking about this stuff because it is a lot. But when does it come to the point where, because I have even asked Chief Echeverria,
The new chief for Peoria? He's awesome. I saw him three
is.
different days
He
at the
is.
fair. What an awesome individual.
He is. I wonder, I mean, I've asked him in the past, when does it come to the point, because, there have been a few times that law enforcement has shot somebody, killed somebody. That traumatic event has left their family in limbo. I mean, PTSD as well. So when does it come to a person's mind that they have to kill in law enforcement?
That depends on their fight or flight. A lot of times that happens in a split second. So that police officer, if he's afraid for his life, or she, I should say she or he.
Right.
If they're afraid for their life, they may pull that weapon and use that weapon. And then if the person they engaged against doesn't have a weapon,
right,
then there's going to be a consequence because they've taken a life when they probably didn't have to, but again, it depends on the circumstances. If you're a female police officer, and there were several at the fair, the 2 or 3 that rode around that I saw, they got off, when they did the scuffle. Both these ladies are 5'2", 5'3". They look like they weigh 110 pounds. Well, you put that up against a 6'4", 220-pound male, a man that size, 2 hits to the face, you could knock her unconscious.
right.
I mean, so he doesn't necessarily have to have a firearm to still be a life-threatening threat to that police officer. So
How could he be life-threatening? Okay, because I'm thinking in particular the one case down at Martin Luther King Park. And, rest his soul. But I just think that, and then I'm thinking also about
I don't know the details of that.
Yeah,
shooting.
the one that was shot in front of his parents, and I always thought in my mind that the officer, law enforcement, and whoever, mostly law enforcement, that they would think to preserve life before they kill them, because it seems like it's very unfair. Again, as we started off talking, in the black community, it seems like we see a lot of that, police killing the black kid. And it's like
Unjustified.
It's unjustified. And even if it's justified, I don't understand how come we don't try to preserve life. How come there isn't a task to, take them down physically instead of shooting someone?
Well, and it's hard to train for that. So say a police officer comes up to me and I'm a bad guy and I have a gun on me.
Right.
But I fake him out. I'm real nice and I try to be real polite and I basically try to get the jump on him. If he pulls his taser to shoot me and I pull my gun and shoot and kill him, then he's got to think in his mind, I shouldn't have pulled my taser, I should have pulled my gun. And like you and I said earlier,
right.
Oftentimes these police officers, as soon as they stop somebody or have an interaction with them, in the back of their mind, they have to be thinking, does this guy have a gun? Does he have a gun? Does he have a knife? Does he have something that he can kill me with in less than a couple seconds? So for them to pull a taser, they're going to have to almost see your waistline and know that you don't have a firearm, or there needs to be a greater distance so that they can. But normally when you have a confrontation with somebody, the first thing you do is you close that distance. You get within that bubble.
Well, that's a good conversation for me to have with the chief. The next time I have him or his assistant in, because that is one of those things, like I said, that it's hard to understand. I just, the whole gun thing, I don't understand.
Well, you value life, as I do, and I think most humans in the United States, we really have a high value on life.
We do, but now you have youth who they're thinking, I'm not even sure if I'm going to get out of grade school without being killed.
That's sad.
It's just,
and that shouldn't be a thought for a kid in grade school.
But it is, and right now we've got 8 homicides so far right now, and this is only August, so, and last year, there was, in 2022, there was 24 homicides, and 20 of them were from gun violence.
In Peoria?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And they were majority black.
That's sad.
Yes, it is. And then also the National Center for Health reports has the report that they got in 2021 from the National Vital Statistics System. The mortality data of 2021 Wonders report says that the firearm homicides were 20,968 deaths per 100,000 population.
Wow, that seems incredibly high. I did a little research before coming on here with you.
You know what I was thinking about? I was thinking about each state, Jason.
Right.
Each state having 100,000 people in it. That's a lot of people. Go ahead. What were you saying?
Well, I did some data, just a little bit of research data, and I did my data on how many police officers are assaulted or shot. And it was crazy. I mean, there were 60 of them in 2021. 60 police officers were shot and killed.
Across the nation.
Only from January to September.
Wow.
In 2021. And there were like 6,000, I think it was 6,400 cops were assaulted.
Wow.
So, and you have to think in your mind, like one of the things I think of as a citizen, and a gun guy, if they're willing to come up and attack a police officer and shoot him, he's in a position of he's in a position of authority, right? He's wearing a gun and a badge, and for the most part, I view police officers as they're there to help maintain order in our society. If I don't do anything wrong, I mean, obviously, when you're driving down the road and a police car pulls out and they're behind you, everybody gets nervous. And it doesn't matter if you're an African American or you're white. We all get nervous, and you're like, oh boy, I hope I don't have any taillights out. Am I speeding?
Yeah, but in most African American and black neighborhoods, black and brown neighborhoods, there's more pulling over blacks than there are in any other neighborhood.
I didn't know that.
Oh, there is.
Yeah, I just know the certain areas where they usually sit for. But it seems like ever since COVID, not many police departments are doing tickets or
not as
speeding.
Much.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like they pull you over as much for.
Much. But then there's this other flip side of me that says that this one-on-one killing that's going on is mostly within the youth of the black community.
And black-on-black violence?
Yeah. And because there's so much hate and there's so much, like I said, these kids, they don't value life, like you said. And I'm over my neighborhood watch too,
Mm-hmm.
and I have, majority of Peoria neighborhoods in the, the mid areas, central areas of Peoria are starting to, the more renters come in, there's starting to be
Mm-hmm.
more black and brown people in the city, and
Mm-hmm.
and that's okay.
Right.
And I'm used to a mixed multicultural neighborhood, but boy, I tell you, I'm a black person. But sometimes when my people come up in the neighborhood, they're not. It just depends on where they grew up at.
Mm-hmm.
Because I have some white neighbors that are the same way.
Right.
Depending on where they grew up at, they have
What's
loud
socially
music.
acceptable?
Exactly,
Yeah.
loud music. Somebody might be
Rude.
trying to rude, or
Mm-hmm.
somebody might be trying to be slick and sell some drugs or something. All that stuff comes to the conclusion, well, it ends up down the road being somewhere there's going to be a shooting somewhere nearby. Not the music so much, but the hustling and selling
Right.
drugs.
Right.
So, and we have to do better in a society in trying to bring awareness. That's why I'm glad that you're here today to talk about these guns. And also, I wanted to mention that the suicide deaths in America, and this came from the same study from the CDC Wonder Report, says that the suicide deaths in America are 26,328 per 100,000 population, and that is from gun violence. And so was the other one for the homicide rate.
Wow.
Those were from gun violence. I mean, taking their own lives,
Mm-hmm.
suicide, guns, people killing people with guns. So, you can see why a mother would be like
Right.
frantic about these numbers.
Right.
But
And it's a
somehow-
tool that makes it easier.
Well, yeah.
It's
and-
easier for me to use a firearm to take my own life than it is for me to have to work at it for 30 minutes to hang
well,
myself.
do you feel like it's the coward way out to just because I think
Well,
sometimes,
I believe that, but
Yeah.
that's looking at suicide from my perspective, and as a Christian and
even
as a person who loves the
shooting
Lord,
someone, even shooting someone, instead of wanting to
do you
talk
take
to
a
'em,
human life,
Yeah.
and for what reason? If I take
Yeah.
this evil person's,
Mhm.
what I deem in my mind,
Right.
he's evil, he's trying to
Mhm.
kill other people.
Right.
If I kill him, do I save 4 other people? So, for example, I had a friend who owned a Mercedes, and he was carjacked, and this is up in Chicago 3 or 4 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And he said he got out, and he could have turned and shot the kid that stole his car,
Right.
but he didn't. And the kid took off and went, 2 miles and wrecked the car.
Mm-hmm.
But he said I could have killed him and shot him and killed him,
Mm-hmm.
and then they would have wanted to hang me for murder. He said, but what if he would have took my car and I didn't shoot him, and he shot up to 80 miles an hour and hits a family 3 blocks away and kills the mom and 2 kids?
Mm-hmm.
Then are they going to say, or is he even going to think in his own mind, I'd have been better off to kill the bad guy and only kill 1 life than
Right.
lose 3 other lives? So it's hard to weigh stuff like that. But
Yeah. Yep, that is so true. Well, thank you again, Jason, for coming on our show, and
thank you for having me.
I appreciate what you do in the work that you do in protecting and monitoring and trying to keep safe, just like I do with our police. I believe the law is for the lawless, those who don't want to follow the law. My son was in the Navy, is what I wanted to tell you. And he was in the Navy delayed program, so he didn't actually get to serve in the Navy yet.
Right.
But he was in the delayed program at the time he was killed. In
Oh.
September of 2006, he was supposed to deploy in October.
That's sad.
So, and he was killed by gun violence. And unfortunately, I look out at the cemetery and I say, there are a whole bunch of doctors and lawyers and teachers and all kind of people who could have been really successful in life. It was all because of someone who chose to take a gun to take someone's life. And that's really sad.
I agree.
Yeah, but thank you again, Jason, for coming. Thank you, listening audience, for listening to another episode on Mother's War on Violence. And thank you, WCBU. You're listening to 89.9 FM.